All right. Good evening, guys. This is the our fortnightly Q&A live session. So, welcome. I'm just going to wait until a few people actually join in right here, and hopefully all of the sound should be okay. So, let me just get on to a couple of settings here just to make sure. Alright guys, so I'm just double checking. Thanks for joining. Welcome guys. Really good to see you. Just want to make sure, there we go. We've got everybody in here. So Tom, how you doing? Hey, how you doing, Edward? Welcome. So guys, let me know, can you hear me okay? Hopefully the sound and everything is okay here. Just want to make sure that we don't have any technical issues like I did a few weeks back. So and hopefully we can get all of this onto one live stream without any issues whatsoever. Perfect. Welcome, Anik. Welcome, guys. How you doing? So this is the fortnightly kind of Q&A. So I thought, yeah, we just hang out here and just have a little chat and see what's going on and take an opportunity to answer a load of questions as and when you have them. So just a couple of updates from me for the channel for the coming weeks going forward. I'm going to be changing the times I upload the videos. It's been quite sporadic actually, to be honest, and that's my fault because with everything else that's going on and everything else that I have to do, I shoot the videos, I then literally edit and then upload, and I tend to just make them go live straight away. But what I have been paying attention to over the last kind of like week or so, week and a half, are the channel analytics. And the channel analytics tell me that most of you guys are on the channel or on YouTube at 5 p.m. is the most popular time, so 5 p.m. onwards. So it kind of doesn't really make sense for me to upload these videos at 9 a.m. in the morning when there's nobody here. So we're still going to keep it to 2 days a week, so Tuesday and Friday. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be loading at 5 p.m. on a Tuesday and a Friday. So yeah, hopefully it will help me maximize viewership in terms of the views that I'm getting on the videos as well, because that's really important for the algorithm and ensuring that the channel can actually grow. So it's going to be at 5 p.m. on Tuesdays and Fridays. So just a small tweak to how things are working, but worth mentioning, I know, but worth mentioning anyway, because this week was an absolute mess and I did get a few comments. So the podcast goes out every Monday at 6 a.m. And this week I was like, okay, look, because I edited it and I was working till really late, and I knew that I had a crazy Tuesday ahead. So I literally scheduled it for 6 a.m. the same time as the podcast, and I did get a few comments saying 6 a.m. really. So yeah, we're going to change that now, and I've been paying attention to the analytics. So yeah, it's going to be 5 p.m. Tuesday and Friday. So there's already quite a number of you on here, so thank you so much for joining. There's already a question in here from Ed. We'll get to those in a minute. But the guys, this is your opportunity. Ask questions, any questions. You don't just have to ask me questions about investing, by the way. Obviously, I talk a lot about investing, and that's obviously something that I enjoy doing. But if you have any questions in just general finance or just general money matters, mortgages, that kind of stuff, feel free to throw them in here as well. I don't want to limit this to an hour, so we'll see how many questions come in. How you doing, Rumbi? We'll see how many questions come in, and then we'll see how long this basically takes. If it takes a couple of hours, I'm completely cool with that as well. So, yeah. So, Ed's got a question here, and Ed's question is: I use Trading 212 app. Would you say only having 10 different shares? Not. All right. Let me just. Sorry, Ed. 1 second. I'm using Trading 212 app. Would you say only having 10 different shares and not 20 different ones? Okay. So you're asking whether you should have more shares or less shares. From a diversification point of view, you probably want to have more, but it's not just about the number of having 20, right? What's really important here is that you get the diversification across the sectors or industries as well, and the geographical regions. So if you've got 10, that's a good start. I mean, you need between 12 and 20 to start diversifying your portfolio anyway. So if you've got 10, you're going pretty good. And if you're going to go up to 20, just make sure that you haven't got all tech companies, if that makes any sense. Just make sure you're not just using like Facebook, Tesla, Amazon, and all those tech companies. Make sure you're getting a good mix. Free Trade do this better than Trading 212. Free Trade actually give you a breakdown of all of the sectors. So there's tech or information technology, some providers will call them. There's finances, construction, there's retail, there's pharmaceuticals, obviously, there's manufacturing, there's energy. So make sure you've got a good mix across the different sectors as well, just to make sure that you get full diversification. If you're thinking about, well, how do you actually then go and pick those companies, what I would do is, and one starting point for you might be to have a look at a sector, say, for example, pharmaceuticals, and look at the top players within those, and then do your research on each of those companies accordingly. Then you then filter out according to whatever your criteria is. You might be dividend investing. So if you're dividend investing, your filter would be, are they paying dividends? And then you can do your research and start to draw down from there. So I hope that answers the question, Ed. Rachel, I've just signed up to a 5-year fixed rate mortgage. Best way to pull out the equity on my home. What's the best way to pull out the equity on my home? If you've got right, okay, so you can pull out equity any time. There isn't anything that's preventing you from doing that. I think there's a couple of things you need to bear in mind. A lot of the lenders will still have a loan to value. So, for example, right, let's just say your property is worth £100,000, and let's just say your mortgage is, say, £30,000, right? So that means that your current loan to value is 30%, because value 100,000, mortgage amount 30,000, so 30% loan to value. Some providers will still have a cap on how much you can borrow, so how much equity you can actually release. So if they've got a, say, an 80% loan to value cap, then that means that the maximum you'll be able to draw out will be £50,000. But you can do that at any time. One thing that's worthwhile bearing in mind is, because you're releasing the equity, you're taking out a different loan. Whatever rate that you get will be on a different rate and across a different term. So what some clients would do when I was advising was, you've just signed into a 5-year fixed rate. If you go and release equity now, then you might decide you want to release, say, another £30,000 from the property. That's obviously a £30 loan against the property, so mortgage. And what you can do is you can look at a 4-year fixed rate that will end around about the same time as your 5-year. I hope that makes sense, Rachel, but you can pull money out of your property, you can pull equity out of the property at any given time. Just speak to your lender and see what they've got available. The good thing right now is interest rates are really, really low, so there shouldn't really be too much of an issue. Aha, Ignatius, what's my take on Tesla shares this week? I'm interested to see what Elon's going to talk about Battery Day, which is on Tuesday. Yeah, I'm really, really interested to see what's going to happen. If he delivers good news, then we'll see the share price spike again, I would imagine, because anything that he announces this week in terms of battery technology, if they're good advancements, and there was lots of speculation around the batteries now being more cobalt than nickel, going more dry than wet, and also being able to go into a new module type of design, which will free up space and mean that they can put more into packing more density. If he announces anything solid, anything really, really good, then that means that there'll be profitability across the Model 3, the Model Y, and there's rumors that if he is talking about, batteries that can last for 1 million miles, then you're really, really onto a winner there. So I would imagine, depending on what he announces, there's already talk out there to say that people are going to be very, very disappointed if he doesn't announce a 1 million mile battery. I don't know whether that's going to be the case or not, but if the news is good, if it's received well, I would like to think that the share price will go up. I mean, I was looking at the share price on Friday, and to be honest, it's a ride when you invest in stocks like this, right? Because I remember, what was it, 4 days after the stock split, it was down to like $389, and it's like $441 right now. So it's hovering in that $400 mark, which is, for me, I'm happy with it being there. If it goes any higher, fantastic. But it's going to be an interesting day on Tuesday, and the news and how well it's going to be received is going to be the big thing. I would like to think that good news will mean that the price will rally, more people will buy stock because it's more good news. The next day is going to be obviously Q3 returns. That I'm a little bit more nervous about, but we'll get there and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Right, so Tom, I was wondering what your thoughts are about saving up for a house with mates in order to get one together and rent it out together. Tom, really good question. I think there's nothing wrong with it. I think you definitely need to go into it with your eyes open in terms of what could go wrong. I had this question with a consulting client this week, and my answer was, go in and owning a property with friends or relatives or anyone like that. That's absolutely fine as a principle. However, you do need to bear in mind and have a contingency for, and you need to talk about this together as a group of mates, thinking about this as well. What happens if one of you wants to sell at any given time? Because if you buy property and you rent it out, it may be another year, maybe 2, before you're able to release equity from that property. So what happens if someone needs to get out? And you might think that it might not happen, but these things do happen. Trust me, they do. So you need to have a contingency in place, and make sure that you have conversations around what the eventualities are if somebody wants to sell, if somebody wants to release equity. You also got to remember as well, this house will form part of your collective net worth. So there are also other implications that you need to consider. But in principle, it's a really good idea. If you all get on really well, you all communicate really well, then absolutely. But just be mindful of what the downsides are potentially, if something happens where you fall out or someone needs to get out of something. So hope that answers the question, Tom. Right, John, which industrial sectors do you think are the most suitable for investing during this phase? The financials and energy are a good shot now. In terms of sectors, I always say look at sectors that are absolutely crucial to our day-to-day living. So energy, absolutely. Financials, you've got to pick the financials carefully, because if you think about the big banks, right? So you think about HSBC, Barclays, these guys are taking a hammer in still. They have issues. They've got really big issues. So it's where you invest within that sector. I mean, there are lots of new providers that you could probably get invested in that will probably give you a really good return if they're available. I would also have a look at things like recovery stocks. So people like British Airways, IAG. Was it Carnival that had a bit of a slump last week? That may be a little bit of a gamble, because you need to really have a look at what's going on with that company specifically. I mean, they lost $3 billion. I mean, $3 billion is nothing to be sniffed at. So yeah, look at sectors that are essential, I would say, to day-to-day life. Just have a look at those. I mean, tech has done great during this period of time. Tech has done amazing. So a lot of this will be based on research. Select your sector, look at the big boys within there, and then you need to have your criteria in terms of what you're looking for. Are they dividend paying? If they're dividend paying, then that means they're going to have a really good balance sheet, and that means they've got money behind them, right? But you need to do your research. So financials, energy, they are good shots. Tech, though, has blown it out the water, and that's simply because of people like Amazon, Tesla, and the like. So yeah, they're good sectors, but again, just do your research with them. Rumby, is there any finance apps for index funds, or how can I get started? Okay, so index funds, The whole point of an index fund is that basically you get access to a load of stock or companies, and it's passively managed. You can get that with most robo-advisors. So if you go Wealthify, Nutmeg, people like that, you'll get funds with them that will be index funds, passively managed. They can be quite expensive because obviously they take you through like a process to identify what risk you're going to be taking, so on and so forth. You would get it cheaper if you went with the likes of Hargreaves Lansdown, Vanguard, and people like that. But you kind of need to know what you're doing, to be honest. So you need to have a little bit of a background behind you. But that would be an easy way to kind of access them. The beauty about the likes of Wealthify and Nutmeg is they'll do all that work. You pretty much just answer a few questions and go through their process, and the money's just going to be invested according to the way they think will be best for you. So you can get started with a robo-advisor, but again, it depends on whether you've got time to do the research on this, or whether you just want to send money off to people. But bear in mind that you've got costs. Robo-advisors, Wealthify, Nutmeg, Moneybox, people like that will still give you a passive means of investing. But yeah, true index funds you can get from Fidelity and stuff like that as well. Adam, where did you just go? 1 second. There we go. Okay, hey Pete, do I A, continue to invest in the workplace pension, no more contributions available but tax efficient, or B, invest in second fund with Vanguard, which is cheaper cost of your content? Cheers, Adam. Right, okay. I have to be careful here because you're asking me whether you should do A or B, and the reality is I don't know your full circumstances to say you should do A or B. So let me just give you my general thoughts. So continue investing in the workplace pension, no more contributions available but tax efficient. So are you saying you've maxed out your full 40k allowance for this year? Because if you have, then you can't go and invest into a Vanguard pension or anything like that. You can go and do a general investment. If that were the case, then in opposed to just doing a general investment, I'll be saying you still need to be thinking about tax efficiency. So maybe ISAs would be a better fit for you, because the first rule of financial planning is you need to think about tax efficiency. So the first couple of blocks that you cover when you talk about tax efficiency: pensions, ISAs. Those are the first two things. So if you've maxed out your pension, so you've paid in 40k already, you can't pay in any more, then the next step will be to go to an ISA. But those are just my thoughts generally. Again, I don't know your personal circumstances, so I have to be a little bit careful, but consider those things. Now, if you've not maxed out your 40k pension allowance for the year, then I would be having a conversation with my employer just to say, look, if I want to pay in more, will you match me? Because they'll be paying in on your behalf anyway. Will they match you? So if you went up, say, from 5% contribution to 10% contribution, will they come up from wherever they are to 10%? Because if they do, that's free money. It's a no-brainer. There's no point in putting the money with Vanguard because you won't get the extra money from your employer. So there's lots of moving parts here, but those are just a couple of things for you to think about. Those are certainly my thoughts. Let me know if you have any follow-up questions and we can go from there. Monique, Vanguard have the below two funds that both track the same index. One is an index fund and the other is an ETF. What's the difference between the two? The historical rate of returns are different. How is that the case when they both track the same index? I'm baffled. That's the FTSE developed Europe, excluding UK, UCT, ITTS. Okay, cool. Right, so the difference here is in what an ETF does and what an index fund does. So my video, is it this Tuesday? I think it was this Tuesday. It might have been, last Tuesday, I spoke about mutual funds, index funds, and ETFs, the difference between the three. So an index fund is basically a passive fund, right? So it tracks an index. So in this example, it's tracking the FTSE developed Europe, right? Okay. So it's tracking whatever basket of companies are within that index. So if that index does well, you're going to see it reflected in the actual fund as well. That's an index fund. You cannot trade that until the end of a trading day, so 5 p.m. on any given day. An ETF is different because it is similar to an index fund. It's a variant of an index fund. But what an ETF allows you to do is to trade it at any given time, 24/7, as long as a stock market is open. So the difference in the performance number is probably derived from the fact that they might have got a point in the day where they thought we're going to sell and the markets are at a high. Whereas with an index fund, you wouldn't be able to do that. You would have to wait until 5 o'clock. So let's just say there's a peak at 12. With an index fund, you can't do anything. You've got to stay until 5 o'clock, hoping that it's still at its peak in order to get the returns. With an ETF, you could trade out of it at 12 o'clock. So an ETF gives you a bit more liquidity, gives you the ability to move a little bit more. Whilst they are the same, that ability to trade will basically mean that then there might be a little bit of a difference in the performance because you have the ability to trade at any point during the day. I hope that makes sense. That's a fairly simplistic kind of explanation of it, but I'd definitely go and have a look at the video where I explain the difference between mutual funds, index funds, and ETFs, because that might give you a bit more of a background, but that's just a very, very brief kind of explanation. What would I say is better? It really depends on what your goals are. If you're the kind of person who just wants to sit there and have the ability to trade in and out of something on a daily basis, then an ETF will give you that luxury. But if you're a long-term investor, I mean, this is the danger of an ETF, right? You could sit there every day and just look at it and think, oh, I'm just going to get in and get out. That defeats the whole purpose of long-term investing. Right? It's good to have, and investment houses will use them to basically give themselves a little bit of wiggle room, right? If it's being actively managed. But if you're a long-term investor, an index fund will still do pretty well. I mean, it's low cost, you've got access to a good batch of companies, and you're investing for the long term. So it doesn't really matter if something goes down in the short term, as long as it increases in value on the long term. So the one that is going to be best for you is going to be depending on what your investment objectives are, what your time horizon is, why you're investing, all those things that I always talk about. So yeah, it's hard to say. Definitely do an index fund over an ETF because I don't know your circumstances again, and this is where the nuance and the context becomes really, really important. Because just looking at an index fund and an ETF for face value doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be fit for your purpose. So it really does depend on your circumstances. Tom, awesome, thanks. Keep it up in mind. I was planning on not moving in on the idea until we all met with a financial advisor about it together. Anyway, in order to keep everything in order. Yes, I mean, you need to see, Tom, you need to see a mortgage advisor. And this is another thing that you're going to have as well if you're planning to do this with mates. If you're planning to do this with mates, you also need to make sure that your mates have got a good credit history. Because you can have a sparkling credit score, credit rating, right? But if one of your mates is shit with money, then he's going to throw a hamper in the works for everybody else. And you also need to bear in mind as well, the minute you get a mortgage with someone, you automatically then have a financial tie with somebody. And in this case, if there's 2 or 3 of you, then you're going to have a financial tie with 2 or 3 people. If any of those guys get into debt, get any CCJs or anything like that, it is going to reflect badly on you as well. So, buying a house with anybody is something that should not be trifled with. You should really, really think carefully about it. But that is another consideration for you to bear in mind. But you definitely need to speak to a mortgage advisor as well, just for him to kind of like talk you through what you guys need to know and all the options and how it would actually work in practice as well. Ovidius, where are you? There we go. Hi Pete. Is it better to spread your money across multiple different banks or stick to one and just have different account pots for specific purposes? There's nothing wrong with spreading your money across different banks, mate. It can get a bit arduous in managing. If you've got 6 different bank accounts with 6 different cards and all that kind of stuff, it can get messy. Where you can keep it simple. I would only say if your concern is around the value that you hold with each of the banks, I would say that you probably don't need to worry unless you have large sums of cash. So if you've got like $500,000 in cash, then yeah, you may really want to consider very seriously about spreading around different banks, because the banks will only cover you under the Financial Services Compensation Scheme for £85,000. So you've got £500,000. Then that is something you definitely need to be thinking about. But if you're not anywhere near that level, then there's nothing wrong with putting it in one place. You're going to be covered if they go bust. But there's also nothing wrong with actually spreading the money as well. It's different strokes for different folks, really. It depends on what your personal preference is. And it depends on how comfortable you feel with said bank or banks. If you really feel strongly that, you know, you don't trust them or you want to get your money out, then, you know, there's nothing wrong with doing that. As long as you're able to manage it and keep it all tidy, keep it all secure, so on and so forth. And I will say, though, if you've got £500,000 in cash, that's a lot of money to have in cash, though. You need to think about investing unless you've got money invested and that's your play fund money. And trust me, I know people who have had 200 grand in cash just because they want it to be available for any emergencies. There are levels to this stuff, and that kind of stuff does exist. So if that is you, mate, well done. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with having your accounts all over the place if you need to. Jord, will I be offered less of for a mortgage with what's going on with COVID? It depends on your lender, mate. So I've not actually advised on a mortgage for probably about 2-3 years, but from speaking to some of my mortgage advisor mates, I know that some of the lenders right now are apparently lowering their loan to value. So for example, before you could go and get like a 90% loan to value. Some of them are not doing that anymore. Some of them are saying it's either 80 or 75%. Some of them are also not lending as much, depending on whether you've been in a job where you've had to take a pay cut with furlough. So that's really, really important to bear in mind. Some of them, however, though, are taking a note, so a letter from your employer to say, once you go back up to full pay, that they'll then lend you the additional amount. So the answer to that is yes and no, depending on where you're going. What I would strongly recommend for you, though, is you go and see an independent mortgage advisor, right? Not an advisor in your bank or a bank. Go to an independent mortgage advisor. The reason why that is important is that an independent mortgage advisor will basically sit down with you, find out what your goal is, what house price you're looking in the range of, what deposit you have. They'll have a look at how long you want to borrow over. They'll have a look at all of what your affordability, what you can afford, so on and so forth. You're going in and going out, all of that kind of stuff. They'll include all of that. And then what they'll also do is, based on the conversation that they have with you, they will also then go and source in the market the best deal for you. So there are over 100 mortgage lenders. They're not just like HSBC, Barclays and all these banks. There's so many more out on the market. An independent mortgage advisor will take all the information that they gather from you and go and search the entire market for a lender that will best suit you, not the other way around, because that's what tends to happen. People walk into HSBC or Barclays and then you've got to fit their criteria. With an independent mortgage advisor, they will go to the market and they will find a person that suits your criteria. So definitely take some time to go and find an actual proper independent mortgage advisor and let them advise you and source a mortgage for you. If you need help, ping me a message on IG. I know a good number of really, really good independent mortgage advisors that can help you as well. But if you already know someone, that's fine. Roy, any advice on private pension funds account with Moneybox? Okay, yes. So, the Moneybox. So in my video, like Friday, day before yesterday, I did a little bit of a run through the fun fact sheets for Moneybox. Now, it's really, really important, guys. Like, what they're doing is absolutely great. It's fantastic because the numbers are mind-boggling. 19.4 billion quid. People just forget, like, this money lying around. The fact that you've got an ability where you can invest money with, Moneybox in a LISA or your ISAs or your general investment accounts, and then have your pension money with the same provider, that for me is golden. So they're doing a great job there. However, they only have 3 funds available. Now, it's really, really, really important, if you are going to be looking for a home for your pension, that you have to do a little bit of due diligence. So I know for a fact I've got one of my small pension pots with PensionBee, and they've got, I think, is about 6 or 7 funds altogether. So they've got a wider range available than Moneybox. So they may be worthwhile just having a look at, just to do a little bit of a comparison to see whether their funds will work better for you based on what you want to achieve going forward. Really, really key considerations. Look, I could talk about pensions altogether. One thing that is important to note though is with PensionBee, you have to be consolidating past pensions, right? So you just can't set up a private pension with them like you can with Moneybox. You have to be moving over either 1 or 2 previous pensions from another employer, for example, in order to use them. But bear that in mind. The fund selections with Moneybox, they've only got 3 funds. They are pretty good funds, low cost. I mean, the Fidelity Index fund was like 0.12%, which is pretty cheap. But you need to add on the Moneybox fees on top of that as well. So you need to bear in mind costs. But I would say if you're looking to move your pensions, your private pensions, then definitely do some research. It also depends on how much you have to move as well. Now, whilst it's great to have everything on your phone, I would strongly argue that if you're moving over 30 grand, then you should really pay attention to actually perhaps maybe just getting a little bit of advice on making sure that it works as hard as possible for you. But again, if you need any pointers on that, just let me know on IG. Chantel, okay, here we go. So, where are you? I've just lost you. Let me just go back up again. Happy Sunday to you. Pensions currently matching contribution with my employer, and I also pay into a stocks and shares ISA. What else should I be doing ready for retirement? I'm 30 and only started this year. Okay. Again, I need to be a little bit careful because I don't know your full circumstances, but these are my thoughts, right? So you've only just started this year. There's a couple of points that I really want you to take away and really want you to go and focus on. First and foremost, have you worked out based on your contributions via your workplace pension what your income is going to be in the future? Right, I talk about this all the time. We need to have a goal. So what is your goal? What income do you want in 35 years time when you retire? If you're looking to go to 65, you may not be. You may be looking at going at 50, in which case you've only got 20 years or 25 years if you're going to 55. So what level of income do you want? Now, the best way of working that out is to have a look at what you're earning right now, or one of the best ways to work it out will be to look at what you're earning right now. Assuming you own a property, you're paying down the mortgage, take out your mortgage payments, keep everything else. And then that monthly cost multiplied by 12 should give you a yearly income amount. What you then have to do is try and extrapolate to what that might be worth in the future. I actually help people with this on one-to-one consultation. So if this is a little bit complex, you want to work with me one-on-one, just let me know. Ping me a message on IG. But definitely you need to get an idea of, right, how much income would you need at 55, 60 or 65, whatever your retirement date is. And then you need to try and work backwards in terms of what you need in a pension fund to actually get that amount in income. A lot of people think that 150 grand is going to be enough to kick out 10 grand a year. Believe me, it's not. And that is the really uncomfortable reality that people face. So there's this real big difference between expectation and reality. And for a lot of clients, even when I was advising as a financial advisor, big shock when we start getting into the reality of what they're facing. 150 grand is not going to get you anywhere near enough income for your needs. Absolutely not. I mean, if you just think about it logically, if you've got £150,000 in a pension pot and you're taking out £10,000 per year, that is only going to last you 15 years. What happens after the 15 years? Where do you get your money from? Therefore, you need to be aiming to have as much in a pension pot as you possibly can, and you need to feed that into your plan right now in terms of your contribution levels. So if you're already paying into your workplace pension, fantastic. I'll be questioning what levels you're contributing at. So your employer's going to be paying in 3%, you'll be paying in 5% as a default. Can you afford to pay in more now? If you pay in more now, what is that going to get you? You still need to have an idea of what that's going to get you. Also be asking the question, will your employer match your contribution? So if you go from 5% to 10%, will they go from 3% and meet you at 10%? Because if they will, then it makes it worthwhile you adding that additional 5%. It might be a little bit painful, you might miss it, but in the long run you won't. But that 5% becomes, it becomes 12% because they're going to add in another 7% for you. The ISAs are great. Always, ISAs are just there. The income from an ISA will be tax-free as well. So you can continue to do those two things. But definitely consider those points that I've just mentioned there. How much income do you want to be living on at your retirement date in the future? What level of contributions do you need to be making now to make that a reality? And then also just making sure that you're maxing out as much as you possibly can at your workplace, and ask if your employer offers a matching scheme for your pensions. Those are just 3 things straight away. If you need help again with trying to get a grasp of, right, what is that amount and how much do you need to be contributing, that kind of stuff, I do exercise with people on a one-on-one basis where we can talk about that, and I can take you through a couple of tools to get you in that place and arrive at what monthly amount will get you there within reason based on certain assumptions. But let me know on IG. Happily work with you one-on-one on there. Okay, so Roy, I'm a PAYE and I have a workplace pension. Could I also have a private pension through Moneybox? And do I get tax relief on my private contributions? Yes, you would. However, a lot of the stuff that I've mentioned for Chantel will also apply in this case. So if you've got a workplace pension scheme, you're better off throwing as much money as you possibly can into your workplace pension scheme. Number one, because your workplace pension scheme will be cheaper than Moneybox. I can almost guarantee that. If it's more expensive, I will be astonished. Workplace pensions are a really, really cheap way for you to get access to pension investments, essentially, right? Because they have caps on how much fund managers or investment houses can charge for running them. So you need to bear that in mind because the cost is a big issue. The second thing you have there is the whole matching thing that I've explained there. So if you're going to be putting money into a private pension, what's the point of doing that if you paid into your auto-enrollment, your workplace scheme, and your employer were to match you? You don't want to say goodbye to free money. You don't want to leave money on the table. So bear that in mind. I would say that you would probably be better off contributing to your workplace. Another point that is going to be really important for this is, and I don't know whether you've done this or not, and if you haven't, or if anybody watching this hasn't done this so far, most workplace pension schemes will go into something called a default fund. So a default fund will be a run-of-the-mill 50% equities, 50% bonds, right? Everybody goes into that default fund unless you change tactic. So what I'd be recommending all of you to do is speak to your HR department tomorrow and say, look, do you have any information on the pension fund? Find out whether you're in a default fund or not. If you are, and you're like 30 like Chantel, I would be asking the question why you're not going into a high risk fund. And the reason why I'll be asking that question is because you're not going to need that money for circa 20 odd years. You might as well have it working as hard as possible for you and go into a high risk fund, because over the long term, the exposure to greater risk could potentially get you better rewards, especially with the compound interest. Now, from a personal experience, personal point of view, my funds in my pensions are all high risk because I'm not going to need them for 25 years. So for me, I'm like, I might as well. Now, you may not be of the appetite to go full on risk, but I will guarantee you right now, within the workplace scheme, you're probably going to have maybe 3 or 5 funds, between 3 and 5 funds. So even if you don't want to go to the other end of it, of high risk, there should be one up from the fund that you're in right now that will give you more exposure and hopefully better potential for returns. So that is something that you absolutely have to do tomorrow. Go and make sure that you're not just stuck in a default fund, because default funds, they do okay, but a lot of the times they don't deliver the best results possible, considering you're not going to need this money for such a long time in the future. So those are just a couple of thoughts there, guys. Krishna, when does someone have to start paying tax from earnings tradings? Well, technically speaking, you've got to pay tax on all of your earnings. I mean, I don't trade specifically, so I'm an investor, not a trader. So I'm probably not the best person to answer this, but my logic basically would say that if you're getting returns from your trading, then you should be paying taxes on your returns. So, yeah, I mean, the question will be is, are you tracking what returns you're getting from your trading? Because potentially they'll be classed as capital gains, potentially. Now you've got an allowance for capital gains, but you need to make sure that you don't bust that bubble. And if you do, you also need to be aware that you have to report it for HMRC via self-assessment. That's just my high-level view, but I don't trade, I invest. So trading and investing are two different. Trading is very much high volume. Investing is holding long-term, short to medium term. So those tax issues are very, very different. Very, very different. There's a question here from Rachel. FinCEN. Thoughts on FinCEN? I don't know what that is. I've not come across it. Rachel, let me know what that is in the comments below, and I'll give you my thoughts on it based on your explanation. But I haven't come across FinCEN. Tom, I'm currently saving up for a shared ownership property, but is it better to rent? My personal view is, mate, you need property. Property is king. Property is one of the kings anyway. Look, if you rent, it's dead money. If you rent, you're paying off somebody else's mortgage. Where if you go into shared ownership, at least the rent that you're paying is giving you ownership, part of an asset that will appreciate in value. Particularly if you're in London. I mean, if you're in London, shared ownership, get in there. Especially the fact that you get the ability to ladder, to staircase the property as well. So even if you're buying at, say, 40% of the property, you get the ability to staircase your ownership, so you can buy an additional 5 or 10% in years to come. You know, ownership is really, really important, guys. You know, renting, you're paying somebody else's mortgage. That money could be going into a property that is going to belong to you, that will appreciate in value, that is going to increase your net worth. So my personal view is, you know, go on with shared ownership, get some ownership, own something, and, you know, let your money work for you. The bouncer, right, okay, hi Pete, a few years ago I merged my pensions, but I can't seem to remember who this was with. Is there a way to track this down? If you've already merged it, it becomes a little bit difficult. How long ago was this? Let me know. And have you moved address as well? See, I see this all the time, and it is a bit of a nightmare, which is why people like PensionBee and what Moneybox are doing is really, really good. But they need a certain amount of information from you, because they seek employer schemes, so workplace schemes. So if you've moved it from an employer into somebody else, that can be a little bit difficult. You're going to need to find some kind of information from somewhere, paperwork of some kind, to get an indication of who it's with. Because I'm just thinking, most of the pension tracking services that you have on a few of the websites now, because if you Google pension tracking service, there's a couple of government sites on there, but they're going to ask you for who the administrator was, or they're going to ask you for the name of your employer. So it's a bit of a tricky one. How long ago did you do it? Let me know. Ovidius, I'm a musician. I'm not even close to 500k. But thanks for sharing your thoughts. No worries, mate. Listen, you never know. As a musician, musicians make a very, very good bank. I've got a friend who's a producer who's absolutely killing it right now. And yeah, you get into that arena, you're absolutely laughing. Krishna, what's your thoughts on Kathy Wood's ARC Innovations ETF? You know, I've not had a look at her ETF specifically, but Kathy Woods is one of the investment greats, really. She's very, very well respected. Very, very, very well respected. So anything that she builds, I'm sure, has really good research behind it and really good fundamentals behind it as well. So yeah. Jai, do you invest in property and you and you know about right to buy. Right, I don't invest in property currently because my view is, I'm an investment guy. I've worked in investments for 8 years at least now, in wealth management in the industry for 15 years. Properties are tax inefficient. So for my goal specifically, I'm not at the point where I'm looking at buy-to-let properties just yet. I probably will do in the next couple of years or so, but where I've been earning really, really high income for the last few years, over the last number of years, I've heavily invested into tax efficient vehicles and not put it into property. That isn't to say that I'm not going to do it in the future, because it is on my radar. I had a look at it last year and held fire because I had other things on my priorities. I'm looking at it currently, but it's just looking at prices basically, where there's going to be a drop. Right to buy, yes, a right to buy. If you're in a council place, there are criteria with right to buy, and I'm just trying to get an understanding of. I'm trying to recall what the criteria is. So I know that you have to be in there for a number of years. You can't be in any rent arrears as well, and there's a few other things as well that are in there. If you're asking, is it worthwhile doing? Absolutely, because you can pick up a property at a discount price. That I don't think with right to buy, if I recall properly, that they actually sell it at a market value. They give it to you at a discount. I think it's something like 15% or something like 20% discount. I think. I can't quite remember. I've not done a right to buy for years and years and years, and I'm trying to remember this from textbooks from 5 years ago. So, yeah, right to buy. If you've got the ability to get a right to buy, mate, at the end of the day, it's at a property, and you'll get it at a discount, which is really, really good. You just got to make sure that you meet the criteria, though. That's really, really, really important. Roy, my workplace pension is with Royal London, and I'm doing maximum contributions already, but I don't have a bit. But I want to have a bit more as pension. Okay, cool. Yeah, so if you've maxed out your pension already, if you've maxed out your pension contributions, if you go and pay into a private pension elsewhere, you're breaching the pension allowance. So that 40k is the maximum you can pay in per year into any pension, workplace or private pension. So if you were to go and pay into a private pension right now, they'll allow you to pay in, but you're going to have a huge penalty from HMRC. So in that circumstance, you need to have a look at the next tax efficient vehicle, which will be things like ISAs. And then from there on out, there are other things that you can possibly have a look at within investments as well. If you've maxed out your pension contributions, then you're probably a high earner. And within that, if ISAs and the 20,000 allowance isn't going to be enough for you, then there are other things that you can explore as well to reduce your tax liability that you can then use and cycle into ISAs later on. It can be a bit complex and a bit convoluted. That's where you really need to take advice. But those are just my thoughts at the time being. Again, feel free to reach out to me on IG. But those would be my thoughts. If you've maxed out maximum contributions in your pensions, doesn't matter if you go private pension, 40k is your limit. You cannot pay any more than 40k in without getting a huge penalty. So just bear that in mind. Paul, what are your opinions on mortgage overpayments versus investing in this current climate? I'm thinking of going both 50-50. Okay, so these are my thoughts. One of the key considerations that you need to bear in mind is interest rates, right? So at the moment, and it depends on whether you've remortgaged recently, and it depends what your mortgage rate is. But let's just say, for example, you've got a mortgage where your fixed rate is 1.2%, okay? And you want a full repayment mortgage. So you know over the next 20 years, your property is going to be paid off at that date in the future. Interest rate 1.24%, whatever that might be, right? If you go and pay off a lot of money on your mortgage, you're not really saving yourself a lot of interest, because the interest compared to a mortgage that would have been on 4 or 5%, the interest rate's so small. So small. You then contrast that with what could happen if you were to invest in the market. Now let's just say you invested in, say, like a cautious fund, right? And let's just say you did 3% per year. You're making more on your investments than you would make or save paying off your mortgage at 1.24%. So those are things that are worthwhile bearing in mind. And again, I don't know your personal circumstances in terms of what your mortgage rate is, so on and so forth, to be able to give you a definitive answer, but bear that in mind. have a look at what your mortgage rate is, have a look at if you were to invest. If you use some of these robo investors, a lot of them will give you like assumptions and say, well, if everything works just as we expect it to, this is what the rate of return will be. If it does better, then this is what it will be. If it does worse, this is what it will be. You can then use that as a gauge. But generally speaking, if you've got a really low mortgage rate of like 1 or 2%, then all you need to do on the stock market is really 3% per year. You'll be making more money than you would save on your mortgage. But there's nothing wrong with taking a 50-50 approach. I know people who do that, but those are just a couple of things that are worthwhile considering, Paul. So I hope that's helpful. It doesn't give you a definitive answer, but it certainly gives you sort of my thoughts on the matter. Rumby, what do you think of the FIRE movement? Do you think it's something to aspire to? Good question. I have mixed opinions about the FIRE movement. I think the fundamental principle behind it is actually valid. I think, though, it's not for everybody, and I don't think it's for everybody because of this. One of my big beliefs is that you have to live life with balance. Something I talk about with all of my coaching clients, right? A lot of the time my coaching clients come to me and they're nervous in our first session because we'll be getting into kind of like income and expenditure. They're expecting me to be like, oh, you need to cut this, you need to cut that, you don't need this, you don't need that. I'm not like that. That's not my thing. I believe that if you're going out to work 9 to 5, then you have to get balance in terms of the things that you enjoy doing, and making sure that essentially that you make allowances for those things that you enjoy to do. And with that in mind, a lot of the stuff that I see coming out of the FIRE community is very much about frugal living, like saving every single penny that you possibly can. If you're disciplined, that will work for you. If you want to go on those holidays and enjoy certain things and, you know, still go out for a few meals and all that kind of stuff, then that may not necessarily work for you. I think ultimately you need to enjoy balance in your life, and you need to find an approach to financial independence that works for you, not something that is pre-prescribed with frugality at its center, that mainly focuses on that. Because I know some really hardcore like FIRE people, and that may just be me having only met a good handful of them, thinking that everybody's the same. But those are just my thoughts. I think having your own plan with a balance to get you to your goal is really important. You've got to remember as well, financial independence means different things to different people. For some people it is being able to retire at age 50. For others it's about, you know, having 4 million net worth. You know, it's different strokes for different folks. So it depends on what your goal is and what you want for yourself. The bouncer, okay, there's a follow-up question here. Okay, so let me just have a look. I merged them in 2017, 2018, and it was just before the new GDPR, so they can't call me either. That's a tough one. That's a real tough one. Because you don't have any paperwork at all. Nothing at all. See, even with GDPR, they can't contact you for marketing purposes. But with GDPR, they can and they must contact you for when it comes to the running of your money. So they have to send you some kind of like annual statement, some kind of correspondence to let you know how the pension's being run, how it's performing, and so on and so forth. I'm hoping you've not changed address, because if you have changed address, then that might be a problem. But if you're at the same address, they should send you some paperwork. They have to. The only other thing that you might be able to do where did you transfer them from, mate? It might be worthwhile you just messaging me on IG. Message me on IG, and I'll ask around for you, mate. Yeah, message me on IG and I'll ask around, because I've got a couple of ideas, but it will mean that you need to dig out a couple of things, and message me on IG and we can have a look at it together and stuff. Monique, thoughts on investing in property outside of London? If I can afford to buy in London, is that better, or has London hit its peak? London property. You know what? That's a really, really difficult one to answer, because for the longest time, inside the M25 has always been insulated against all kind of like market recessions, market crashes, particularly in the property market, right? It always has, because of the supply and demand equation. So many people in London, only so many houses to go around, right? With what's happened with COVID, there is a huge question mark, certainly in my mind, and certainly in the mind of some of the people that I speak to who are into property, around what's going to happen with all these office blocks when these businesses realise, and trust me, I know a number of companies in London that are not going back to the office until next year, well into next year. And a lot of companies are thinking about, actually, you know what, people probably work from home. We could have smaller offices. So what happens to all that office space? Now, if you are someone who owns a massive commercial office block, and you're seeing your big company saying, no, we're going to downsize our stuff, you're going to have floors and floors and floors of like property, just like square footage, just vacant. So what do? Do you turn that into property, into residential places? Now, if they did that, there's an argument to say that actually, pretty quickly, you can solve the housing crisis within London to a certain extent. Maybe not totally, but to a certain extent. What does that then mean for property prices? If more stuff comes onto the market, then you potentially see that the property prices might fluctuate, level out, fall. To what extent, though, nobody really knows. I think long term, because London is London, and you're always going to have that equation of supply versus demand, and the amount of people that go to London and live in London, that you're always going to have a pretty healthy property market, especially within the ranges that are appealing and affordable to most. Well, I say affordable. Is property in London ever really affordable? It's nuts. But you know what I mean, in that affordable range, not in the 3, 4, 5 million sort of range. So it's a really, really hard one. In terms of buying inside London or outside of London, again, it depends on your goals. I know people that have bought places in London, and they've seen equity just build into that property within quick succession. I had a friend of mine, Chris, who I worked with in Canary Wharf. He bought a 2-bedroom flat in North London somewhere, and he paid an arm and a leg for this place. But within a year, 150 grand equity, and he worked really, really hard to try and pay it down as much as possible, because for him, he was like, I want to get as much equity in it. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that equity out. I'm going to buy myself one great big, I've got pad down in Kent, and that's what he's done now. So he's used it as a stepping stone. The reality is that if you are, in a position to be on the property ladder in London, then you have a really, really good chance of being a property millionaire at some point in the future. That presents its own issues with inheritance tax, but it depends on what you want for yourself. Buying inside London, great. Barrier to entry, deposit levels, affordability can be an issue, yes. Buying outside of London, though, becomes a lot more affordable. You get a lot more for your money, depend on whether you want to live in it or rent it. Rents are higher in London, rents are less outside of London, but you can accommodate more properties. It really depends on what your goals are. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to it. It's just going to be a case of what you feel is best for you and what best works for your circumstances. Right, where were we? I saw something on FinCEN here a second ago. Let me just find it again. Here we go, Rachel. Leaked files have just announced that major banks were involved in laundering of 2 trillion of dirty money. You know what? That does not surprise me one little bit, because Deutsche Bank is a big corporate in this space. They do anything for wealthy clients, right? And this is why people don't trust banks, and that's why I'm always disappointed in them. Really, really, really. Oh yes, still at the same address. I've been for years before I merged them. So yeah, you should have some correspondence from them, or they have to send you some correspondence on how the investment is doing. So I would say for the time being, hold tight. If you merged them in 2007 to 2018, you should have an annual statement, because unless you've opted in for electronic. If you have, then you'll need to remember whether you signed up digitally and what email address you signed up to digitally. So it might be worthwhile going through your email addresses and maybe just doing a broad search around pensions on your inbox and see what comes up. But yeah, that's the only reason why you wouldn't get something in the post if you signed up to any digital communications, and a lot of them are moving paperless now. So yeah, I hope that helps. My sweet boo, hi Pete. Can I have stocks and shares at ISA and a lifetime ISA from Moneybox together? Yes, you can, because in your lifetime ISA you can only contribute £4,000 a year. So, and your total tax allowance for the year is 20,000. So yeah, if you use your lifetime allowance, you're going to have £16,000 left over. So yes, you can. London Stacker, retire at 50 is the goal. Okay, yes. So, what? Let me just see if I can find your question again, because I don't know if you gave your age. Was it no? That was Chantel. Yeah. So look, mate, from wherever you are right now, you need to work at. You're going to have a time horizon, right? So your year's 250. Then it's all about trying to work backwards in terms of what you're going to need based on the level of income you want at age 50. So that can be quite, I wouldn't say complex, but it does take some work to get there. You have to sit down and you really have to kind of understand, what level of lifestyle that you've got now, whether you want to keep that, what expenses you're likely to have in the future. Work back and then try to extrapolate that as well. So, but yeah, knowing that you got 50 is perfect. But also within a 50, mate, listen. Cars are a terrible investment. I know that firsthand. As nice as Bentleys are, I don't know. I probably would if I turned into like 10-20 million today. Then yeah, I would definitely have a Bentley. But these things are bad investments, mate. They're just really, really bad. It's a simple life all the way. That's something that I watch a lot of financial content, obviously, and it's amazing when you look at some of the wealthiest people in the world. I mean, Warren Buffett is a prime example, right? One of the wealthiest people in the world, worth absolute billions, still lives like an ordinary guy, like he's poor, right? There's no Bentleys, Gucci belts, or any of that around him, because what's really the point? Yeah, you could buy it, but what I've kind of realised is you want all these things, and when you finally get to the point where you could buy it, it's kind of like, well, what the hell for? Especially when you work really, really hard for your money as well. So yeah. Tom, I had a pension as an agency worker via an umbrella company that was paid in for 18 months. Can I still make use of this? Yes, you can, mate. So if you've got the name of the umbrella company, like either Moneybox or PensionBee, literally just type in their details and get it transferred over. The money will still be there. The money is yours. So yeah, you can make use of it, definitely. Harry, I've been investing in stocks and shares via investment accounts and made a sizable gain. Is it possible to pool your CGT allowance with your spouse? Yes, you can, but you need to do a transfer of assets, essentially. Yeah, you need to do a transfer of assets to make sure that you have some of it in her name as well. But you can do that. Well, I have a residential property which I bought through Help to Buy, first time buyer. Can I buy a storage garage? As I think I can't have another property till I pay back the Help to Buy contribution. No, I don't. There's nothing that I'm aware of that prevents you from buying a second property because you had Help to Buy. There's nothing that I know of that will prevent you from having a second property because you've got Help to Buy. Nothing at all. Nothing that comes to mind immediately. So you should be okay. It depends on how you want to buy it though, because if you want to release equity, that might be an issue, because I don't think you can release equity from the property whilst you've got Help to Buy. So that might be something that's worthwhile checking with your lender. So you can release equity to pay off the Help to Buy. But if you want to release equity in order to go and buy something else, I think there might be a little bit of an issue there, because they'll be saying, well, why are you not paying me back first? Potentially. But that's something that you definitely worthwhile checking with your lender. I can't quite remember, but yeah, those are my thoughts on it. I think we got through so much here. Yeah, we got through a lot, guys. Are there any other questions at all? I don't think there are. I want to make sure I've not missed anything off either. So let me just double check. Yeah, mate, you're going to be fine. There's nothing, there's nothing stopping you. If you're going to be buying cash, that's your prerogative. It's your prerogative. They can't do anything to stop you. So, yeah, you'll be fine, mate. Cool. Right, guys, I really do appreciate your time. Thank you so much for all of the questions. Really do appreciate it. You're going to start to see a few changes on the channel and stuff over the next maybe 2-3 weeks. There is a new function that YouTube have basically opened up to me, which is basically a membership thing, and there's a few perks that I wanted to include. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you very, very much. That I also wanted to include just to kind of add a bit more value to you guys. I speak a lot about my investment course. In the top tier, I'm actually going to include the investment course as part of the membership. So if you are using Trading 212 and you're looking for that foundational knowledge, you're going to get access to the investment course as well. Now you'll get lifetime access to it. You'll also get any updates that I provide into the course in terms of updating the modules. So on the investment course, I actually go through quite a lot more than I do on the videos, and it's a lot more structured. So it's in a format that is linear. So as we move through the topics, the whole picture becomes extremely clear. Certainly when it comes to diversification, risk, investor mentalities, those kind of things, that's really, really important. So you'll get that included as part of the membership. I'm still wrestling around with a few of the little bits that I need to do with it, but that might be something that I introduce in the next 2 to 3 weeks. I'm not fully decided on it just yet, but if I do, then you'll see it on the channel. There'll be a separate video that I'll produce just for that. So keep an eye out for you. I mean, just out of curiosity from you guys, and before you leave, would you mind just posting this in the comments for me? What kind of topics would you guys want to hear more of in the videos? So I've gone from, Tuesday and Friday now, so twice a week. But I'm really, really conscious that I want to obviously provide as much value to you guys. Would you like to have more of these sessions? Would you like to have some of these sessions that are offline in workshops on webinar format? Please let me know. Whatever best works for you guys in terms of knowledge and stuff like that, and in terms of just empowering you guys and giving you kind of like a touch point for your questions. Let me know before you leave. That would be great. Okay, so there's one more question here. But what platform would you recommend for someone who wants to invest less than £100 a month and just let it sit there for the long term and grow? Any of the robo-advisors will do, mate. So Moneybox, Wealthify, Nutmeg, those are probably 3 that I would say will be relatively easy for you to access. Please make sure that you double check on obviously their cost though. Do that cost comparison and stuff. But those will be 3 really good ones where, mate, you could just send the money. You haven't got to worry about doing anything. They'll invest it in the background. So yeah, just bear that in mind. I'm just going to note down what you guys feedback on here as well. I'd love to see content for young people, students. Would help me out a lot. Okay, cool. Are you talking about student loans and things like that? I assume that you are, but that gives me a broad idea. That I was actually supposed to do something that I won't say, because it's not happened yet. When it does, it will be on the channel. So I've probably got something coming down the line which will speak to that specifically, but definitely more on that. Tracking investments, I've got that here. When you say tracking investments, what exactly do you mean? Do you mean in terms of tracking performance or tracking particular stocks? What do you mean? Give me an idea, because that means a number of things to me. More content on finance management and security when you're free. Okay, yeah, okay. Actually, on that note, I've actually got something else going on the line for that as well. Tracking stocks. Okay, cool. Tracking stocks. So one of the features that I was actually thinking of doing with this membership thing, if I do agree to it, is I obviously have a lot of contacts in the investment world. I know guys who know so much more than me, who are investment managers and so on and so forth. So one of the things that I'm thinking of providing in the membership side of things is, if we can, and I need to figure out how I do this on YouTube, is if we do it via a live like this, I'm going to have an expert come on and actually speak on specific areas. So when you're talking about tracking investments there, someone who can really give you the lowdown and the detail of, really, really doing high, deep level, like research into company financials, stock research, all those kind of things. That was going to be included in one of the membership things. So I need to figure out how that would actually work. So Monique, what you're saying there, picking funds from a professional level, what the investment managers look at, what research they look at, the research tools you can also use. I was thinking of including that actually within the membership. I need to figure out how we do those lives and I'm able to have a guest on remotely to be able to do that, because within the membership package we will have members only lives, which will be those kind of specialist conversations that we'll have. So that is coming down the line, but I can certainly include some of that stuff in some of the videos as well. But there's a lot to work for. Compound interest. I've got here picking funds. Okay, cool. All right, guys, I think that's it. Nathan, thank you so much, mate, for the contribution. That really, really does help me. It really, really does. I mean, I don't know whether you guys know, this is my full-time thing now. So creating content is pretty much my full-time job. So I'm trying to build the YouTube out as much as possible and try and provide as much content as I possibly can and work with people to kind of, get that foundation that they need in terms of just using money as a tool to create the life that they want. So little contributions like that make a huge difference to the monthly running of the channel and the time that it takes to produce the content and all this kind of stuff. So thank you so much. But guys, I really do appreciate you spending, how long have we been on here for now? I think we've been on here, what's my ticker, where's my timer? I think just over an hour or so. About an hour and 12 minutes. So I appreciate you spending this time with me on a Sunday evening. I really, really do. I know that it's quite late, but guys, until next time, the next live that we'll do will be on the 4th of October. I will try to post into the community, on the community tab on the channel a little bit sooner, because there's so much going on. I tend to do it like a day or two before. I think I did it earlier today. I'm going to try and get those out a little bit more, but I really, really do appreciate that. Roy, so thanks, Roy. So there is, on the chat thing, there's a little S. It's like a little icon. It's like a dollar sign. That's the super chat function. And yeah, you can just click on that, and that will either allow you to submit a super chat, and you can contribute whatever you feel comfortable using that function there. But I really, really do look forward to thank you guys, and Edward, thank you for coming on. But yeah, so I really do appreciate your efforts and appreciate your time with this. And again, if you need any questions at all, people do message me on IG, by the way, so you don't have to wait until these sessions. Actually, there is one question that I do need to answer, because I don't think that she's been on this chat, and she did message me. She messaged me yesterday saying, can you please answer this question in your live on Sunday? 1 second, guys, I do need to find this, because if she watches this back, and I'm not sure she's here, she'll be disappointed I've not answered this question. It was along the lines of the rights offering by IAG. So I have an old colleague of mine who I used to work with in Canary Wharf, who went off to work for British Airways, and they had a rights issue. They were offering the stock at a ridiculous discount. I mean, I was looking at it and I said to her, listen, you need, if they're offering it to you at this rate, you really, really need to just take maybe a few £100 worth, whatever you can afford, take it. So IAG, are these kind of stocks worthwhile buying right now? I guess was the gist of her question. And look, in the videos that I spoke about index funds, mutual funds, and ETFs, I spoke about the fact of trying to invest with the intention of getting saturation through the market. Now, stock like IAG, they are classed as recovery stocks, right? So they're businesses that have been hit quite badly, but are expected to recover in the coming months and years back to their former share prices. Is it worthwhile investing in those kind of companies? Yes. But big caveat. Please make sure that it suits your investment time horizon, it suits your goals, and it also suits your risk profile as well. What I mean is your appetite for risk, right? It's very, very easy to look at a stock that's 50% down and think, oh yeah, I'm just going to get in there. You still need to understand what the business basically does. Now, with people like British Airways, are they going to fail? Will the government let them fail? It is very, very, very unlikely. So is it worthwhile buying shares for that particular reason? Yes. I don't think that they'll ever go bust. I don't think the government would even allow them to go bust. So it's really, really important to bear that in mind. Really, really do bear that in mind. Is it worthwhile buying these stocks, recovery stocks? Do your research. Definitely do your research. But recovery stocks are businesses that there is a huge opportunity. Wealthy people invest in these companies. I've invested in these companies in previous recessions and made a lot of money off the back of them. So the answer to the question is, are they worth investing? Yes, if you get them via a rights issue. Jesus Christ, I mean, I couldn't believe the offering that was being given to Sophia. I was like, well, if I could buy them, I would love to buy them at that rate. So yes, they are. So if those are the kind of stocks that you're looking at right now, they're definitely worthwhile considering. But again, make sure that it meets your goals, it's within your parameters, and it's within your risk tolerance as well. And make sure, obviously, as well, that you always look at diversifying as well. Roy, thank you so much, mate. I really, really do appreciate it. Little things like that matter a lot. Guys, I can't wait to the next one on the 4th of October. If you have any questions in the meantime, find me a message on IG, Conversational Money over there, and I'll happily answer any questions interim the next one. But guys, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I really, really do appreciate it. I'll catch you in a couple of weeks' time, but I'll see you on the Tuesday video. Take care. 5 p.m. by the way, don't forget, 5 p.m. Cheers.